The man brought his girlfriend home to meet his family for the very first time, but the moment they stepped through the front door, his stepmother's son hurled a water balloon straight at him. There was no time to react, but his girlfriend caught it midair before it could hit him. Without missing a beat, she spun around and launched it right back. The boy was instantly soaked from head to toe and erupted into the stepmother charged over immediately and pointed the blame squarely at the girl, accusing her of picking on a child and announcing she would be held responsible if the boy fell sick. The girl fired back without hesitation, asking why no one ever seemed to worry about the man catching a cold. The stepmother opened her mouth to say more, but the man's grandmother cut her off with a sharp and firm rebuke before she could get another word out. The group sat down to eat shortly after, and the girl immediately noticed something alarming. Every single dish on the table contained seafood, and she knew it would trigger the man's allergies. She reached out quickly and stopped him from helping himself to anything. The stepmother seized on this, wearing a satisfied smile, and announcing that every dish had been prepared by the grandmother herself, implying that the girl had simply never experienced fine food before, and that was why she was interfering. The grandmother, offended by the insinuation, picked up a shrimp and placed it directly into the man's bowl, telling him to go ahead and eat. Without a word, the man picked up the shrimp and dropped it straight into the grandmother's most prized soup. The girl had reached her limit. She demanded to know whether these people were truly his family, given that not a single one of them was aware of his seafood allergy. The grandmother went very still, struck for what appeared to be the first time by the realization that she did not actually know her own grandson. The man felt something stir inside him that he had not expected. It was the first time he had ever found himself thinking that having a girlfriend like her was something genuinely good. The truth was that the two of them were not actually a couple at all. Their entire relationship was professional, and it had come about through a complete misunderstanding. A month earlier, the girl had been working 3 delivery jobs simultaneously just to keep herself afloat. On one particular day, she had sprinted up 10 flights of stairs without stopping, desperate to make her delivery deadline, and had collapsed and fainted the moment she crossed the threshold into the customer's home. When she regained consciousness, she found herself overhearing the customer speaking on the phone. The customer was complaining that her older brother was impossibly difficult to please, explaining that he went through multiple household workers every single month, and that even raising the salary to $50,000 a month had not been enough to convince anyone to stay. The moment the girl heard that figure, she sat up and immediately volunteered herself for the position. What she did not know was that the customer was not looking for a household worker at all. She was trying to find her brother a girlfriend. The girl arrived at the interview location the customer had directed her to, still believing she was applying for a job managing the household. Once all the other candidates had assembled, the man began working through them one by one, searching for someone who met his standards as a potential girlfriend.
One of the women impressed him. One of the interviewees turned out to be a man in disguise, and he was shown the door on the spot. The man's attention shifted to the final candidate remaining, the girl. She pulled out her resume immediately and began preparing to introduce herself, but the man stopped her. He told her she was too plain and lacked any distinctive charm. At that moment, his stepmother appeared. She mocked him openly, suggesting that his standards must have dropped considerably if he was willing to consider someone so simply dressed. Something shifted in the man's expression. He turned to the girl and told her he would take her on if she could get his stepmother to leave. The girl crouched down on the spot and began digging through her bag. The stepmother was not remotely intimidated, certain the girl would never actually dare to do anything, and continued directing cutting remarks at the man. Just as his patience was running out entirely, the girl produced a small spray bottle and began spraying it at the stepmother in a continuous stream, announcing that it was a specially formulated pesticide designed for particularly loud and irritating people who buzzed around like flies. The stepmother panicked and fled without another word. The man stared at the girl in genuine disbelief, having had no idea she would resort to something like that. Sensing he might be uncomfortable with her approach, the girl quickly clarified that the bottle had actually only contained facial mist and that she had completely made up the pesticide story. Rather than being put off, the man found himself impressed by her quick thinking and her composure under pressure. He decided she was exactly the kind of person he needed by his side and agreed to bring her on. The girl, still operating under the assumption that she had landed a household management position, asked where her uniform was. The man interpreted this as a hint that she wanted him to buy her a wardrobe, and without a second thought, he handed over an unlimited black card. The woman woke up to find herself at her boyfriend's grandmother's house. It turned out the grandmother had serious concerns that she would embarrass the family and had decided the woman needed to be schooled in the customs and expectations of a wealthy household. The woman said all the right things and nodded along, but within moments, she had drifted off with her eyes open. When her snoring reached the grandmother's ears, the old woman slammed her palm on the table so hard it sent the woman jolting back to wakefulness. Assuming the session had concluded, she slipped into her shoes and started heading for the door. The grandmother and stepmother moved to block her immediately, declaring that her behavior showed a complete lack of respect and demanding that she kneel and apologize. The woman turned around and told them plainly that they had no right to demand that of her. The old woman's blood pressure rose so sharply she nearly fainted, and the stepmother ordered the household staff to enforce the family's disciplinary rules. Hearing this, the boyfriend's sister dropped to her knees in an attempt to plead on the woman's behalf. The woman pulled her up and attempted to walk out, but the servants blocked the exit. Another staff member appeared, carrying a basin filled with ice, and the stepmother ordered the woman to kneel on it. It was in that moment that everything clicked into place for her. This was why her boyfriend had an old injury on his knee that had never properly healed. She also recalled learning that he had once been punished by being forced to kneel on ice simply for visiting his mother's grave without permission. When the stepmother confirmed this with a look of complete indifference, the woman erupted, telling them all that they had no shred of humanity left in them. Before she could say another word, a group of servants converged on her and began forcing her toward the ice. The boyfriend came through the door at that exact moment. He scattered the servants with a few sharp words, took her by the hand, and moved toward the exit. The grandmother stopped them both in their tracks by producing his mother's personal keepsake and making clear that the woman would be punished before anyone left. To retrieve the keepsake, he released her hand and told the room that since the woman was not yet a formal member of the family, he would take the punishment in her place and kneel on the ice himself. The woman watched him begin to lower himself, and something inside her snapped. She kicked the wooden board holding the basin with full force, sending ice flying in all directions, then picked up handfuls and hurled them directly at both the grandmother and the stepmother. They scattered instantly, stumbling over each other to get out of range. The man watched it all unfold and felt something he had not experienced in a very long time. It was the first time in his memory that anyone had stood up for him. His father arrived home at that moment and immediately brought the chaos to a stop, giving the grandmother a sedative to calm her down. The woman attempted to use the distraction to slip out quietly, but the man caught her before she got far. He announced to the room that if anyone dared to treat her that way again, he would walk away from every business the family owned. The threat landed hard because everyone present knew perfectly well that no one else in the family had the capability to run the company. Faced with that reality, the grandmother had no choice but to stand down and acknowledge that she would accept a marriage between them. The woman was floored. She had entered into a contractual arrangement, nothing more, and the idea of actually marrying him had genuinely never entered her mind. While she was still trying to process what had just happened, the man dropped to one knee and slid a ring onto her finger. She had not imagined for even a moment that real feelings had developed on his side, and the shock of it made her refuse him on the spot. He was visibly stunned and struggled to make sense of it, asking why she had treated him so well if she did not actually care for him. She told him he was her employer and paid her well, so being attentive was simply part of the job. The disappointment that moved across his face was unmistakable. He turned and walked out without looking back. The woman understood she had created a problem with no clean solution. She packed her things and prepared to leave the house. The young man refused to accept her resignation when she handed it in. She resorted to telling him she was going back to her hometown to be married to someone else. The words hit him like a blow. He told himself that his proposal must have come across as a joke to her, forced down the sorrow rising in his chest, and let her go. Just as the woman believed their chapter together had come to a close, the grandmother appeared at her door. She stood there outside, asking to be let in, which was so far removed from her usual behavior that the woman was genuinely unsettled. Even stranger, once inside, the grandmother did not offer a single cutting remark. She asked how the woman had been keeping. The woman sat in the awkward silence of not knowing how to interact with someone who had previously made her life miserable. Then the grandmother came to the point. She asked the woman to reconcile with her grandson. The woman declined immediately, saying she had already resigned and that no amount of money would change her position. The grandmother's response shocked her completely. She began to cry, explaining that the family had gone bankrupt and that she had nothing left after their separation. The man had directed all of his frustration at his grandmother. He had concluded that her constant belittling of the woman had made her feel that she was not good enough for him and had driven her away. He told his grandmother that unless she went to the woman and offered a genuine apology, he would surrender every family business he controlled. The grandmother had been certain he was bluffing. He was not. To make things worse, his father, who had no experience running anything, had been making reckless financial decisions that drove the company straight into bankruptcy. When the man found out, the shock and grief of it made him physically ill. The woman did not wait another second. She grabbed her jacket and headed straight for his house. Behind her, the grandmother allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. She had played her part well. Meanwhile, the moment the man received word that the woman was on her way, he arranged himself carefully and began rehearsing an impression of someone gravely unwell. He complained that every part of him was in pain and kept up the performance with convincing dedication. When she arrived and he saw the worry etched across her face, a smile escaped him before he could stop it. She caught it. In an instant, she understood that he had been faking, which also meant the grandmother had fed her a story to bring her here. She turned to leave. He scrambled after her, lost his footing, and came down hard on his knee. She stopped and helped him up, and as she did, she noticed how much weight had fallen off him. The butler stepped in at precisely the right moment and told her that the man had not eaten a real meal since the day she walked out, and that the bankruptcy was entirely real. Every member of the household staff was about to be let go. The woman's resolve softened. She agreed to stay and look after him. The man was overjoyed, and from that point on, he set his mind to making her fall completely and genuinely in love with him. That same evening, she brought out his medication and told him to take it. He refused, claiming he could not stand the bitterness. To get around this, she dissolved the medicine into a bowl of soup, reasoning that the taste would be masked. He leaned over, took one careful sniff, and announced that the soup had turned bitter. She did not believe him and took a small sip to check. It was bitter. She looked at him and asked what it would take to get him to swallow the medicine. He looked away shyly and said he would take it if she fed it to him directly from her mouth. She looked at him for a moment, then picked up the soup, took a sip, and did exactly that. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, like, share, and subscribe my channel.